Alright, so originally I wanted this video to be a brief overview of Samurai, including various tips and tricks for playing it, but the more I wrote and recorded, the more I kind of realized I just wanted an excuse to talk about this job and why I like it so much. In the near future, I am planning on making some overview guides for jobs in Dawntrail so far, but for starters, I want to share why I think this job is so cool and why it's been my main job for practically my entire time playing. After receiving some controversial and honestly pretty annoying changes in the initial 7.0 release, the follow-up patch 7.05 brought some sweeping adjustments to the job. And spoilers, it's awesome. Samurai design team, 2 thumbs up, seriously. Samurai is a melee DPS that epitomizes the idea of easy to learn, hard to master. Featuring a low barrier to entry and an extremely high skill ceiling with a ton of potential for player creativity and skill expression, Samurai has remained a long-time staple of the melee DPS role. In this video, I'll be describing what makes this job unique within its role and describe some of the intricacies and nuances involved. The goal of this video is not to teach you a strict rotation, or even how all of its buttons work. Instead, I want to introduce rotation goals and give a loose game plan that you can keep in mind to help yourself learn and practice. Experience is the best teacher, and I would encourage you to experiment and try new things on your own. And I think it's easier for most of us to remember a couple of loose guidelines than try and memorize an entire rotation sheet. Environments like higher level dungeons and normal raids are honestly great low stress instances for you to experiment and try new things with your rotation. In addition to all this, I'll also share the elements that I personally enjoy and try to explain what makes this job so fun for me, or at the very least, give you a greater appreciation for the job and why it has such a dedicated and passionate player base. Samurai is defined by its assortment of hard-hitting weapon skills that are unlocked after completing certain combo sequences. Very few of its tools are hard-locked behind cooldowns, the majority being built up through its Sen, Kinky Gauge, or Meditation stacks. This makes Samurai a largely build-spend job. Uniquely among most melees, it also does not have a team buff, which means the way you play around burst windows can vary based on your team comp. With so many layers to its damage, Samurai is a best-in-class job for playing under raid buffs, bringing some of the highest burst damage in the game. Its strongest attacks are also uniquely locked behind cast times, meaning you will spend far more time casting than any other melee. It also has the most unique personal defensive cooldown of any melee, being able to convert damage taken into extra DPS. It has a very freeform, customizable playstyle with a ton of GCD flexibility, only really comparable to its striking counterpart Monk. And while it has a remarkable skill ceiling, the job is also very accessible, being one of the easiest melees to pick up and play and even do well with. Additionally, I want to talk about some job complications, let's say. I hesitate to call these problems, and they don't necessarily make the job good or bad, but these are factors that can be problematic that you might need to address with this job. First and foremost, Samurai only provides damage. It has absolutely no team-wide utility outside of its ability to deal DPS and raid buffs. Now this part is a notable strength, but objectively it lacks team-wide utility like a Monk's Mantra and Earth's Reply, or Reaper's Arcane Crest. Because of how flexible its GCD cycle is, it can be very complicated to quote-unquote recover from your loop if you end up missing a GCD or mess up. There are solutions to this, but they can be hard to recognize in the moment. Additionally, this does need to be talked about. Cast times can be a pain point at certain times, and this is a problem that most other melees just simply won't have. Iaijutsu is the defining skill that gives this job its identity, and ultimately, your whole rotation will revolve around how you use it and its different variations. By completing combo strings, you will generate Sen. After generating at least one Sen, you can cast Iaijutsu, and the skill it executes will depend on how many Sen you have. There are 3 in total, and you can only have 1 of each. Casting at 1 Sen will execute Higanbana, a powerful 60-second dot that we want to maintain as much as possible. 2 Sen will trigger Tenkagoken, a useful tool for AoE, but it should pretty much never be used outside of that. And finally, at 3 Sen, Madare is an extremely powerful GCD that deals very high damage. A very large portion of your overall damage as a job will come from just your usage of this skill. So it's very important. Straight up, this is the reason to play the job, and it's undoubtedly the job's most iconic ability. Notably, none of these Iaijutsu actually break combo, which means you can use it in between combo GCDs, potentially unlocking some forbidden sequences. This ability is the core of Samurai and has remained the same since its introduction in Stormblood. Start combo sequences to generate Sen, and use those Sen to execute Iaijutsu. Because Madare is such a large portion of your damage output, your primary goal is generally to use Madare as many times as possible throughout a fight. You can use your cooldown ability Meikyo Shisui to cheat these combo sequences, allowing you to generate a Madare much faster than normal. In addition to this, you want to maintain your DOT Higanbana as much as possible. Your usage of Meikyo Shisui can be used to help reapply the stat as well. In addition to managing its Sen, Samurai has two other resources that it can build, being Kenki Gauge and Meditation stacks. Your Kenki Gauge can be used on various OGCD damage actions, while Meditation can be used only at 3 stacks to execute Shoha, which is another OGCD. While these actions are important for your damage, they are ultimately supplemental resources that will be generated naturally as you work towards and use your Madares. Kenki is gained off of your combo GCDs, while meditation stacks are gained from your Iaijutsu skills, specifically the ones with cast times. Your goal with these OGCDs is to layer them in between your combo attacks and Iaijutsu, making sure not to overcap on either of them. Again though, I do want to reiterate that these are supplemental resources. Your primary goal is to use your defining Iaijutsu abilities. Your gauge will come naturally from doing so. This is a bit of a smaller point, but Samurai also has 2 personal buffs that it wants to maintain at all times, a damage buff and a haste buff. In practice, this is pretty easy to do, you'll just do it naturally as you build up to a Madare, but as combat starts, you want to make sure these buffs are active as soon as possible, and this is going to shape how our opener looks. While Samurai's initial changes in Dawntrail were pretty clunky honestly, the 7.05 patch opened up a ton of room for even more flexibility and creativity with the job. Now, any time after using a Madare, you will automatically gain Tsubame Setsugeka, which is an instant cast repeat of that attack, and you can use it at any point for the next 30 seconds. Previously, a Tsubame could only be used right after a Madare, but the guaranteed Tsubame change and the ability to hold onto it and use it later has notably changed how the job flows. This change gives us an extra layer of resource that we can carry into burst windows, while also giving us access to an on-demand, very powerful, ranged GCD that we can use to keep uptime. To me, this is kind of like giving Samurai Black Mage's Xenoglossy. Ideally, we want to fit it into our burst window, but we can absolutely use it to keep uptime where we otherwise couldn't. Additionally, Samurai has received Tengetsu, which is an impressive upgrade to Third Eye. Lowered cooldown on its main OGCD spender, so we have to think a little bit more about Kenki again. And the addition of the Tendo buff, which allows Meikyo to buff up your next Madare cast with a large amount of additional potency. And yes, this does come with the Tsubame recast. Samurai has also received Zanshin, a 2-minute spender that pretty much just cleans up our burst window a little bit, and notably, Shoha has been upgraded to passively cleave in a line, while Shoha 2 has been removed from the game. While this is mostly just a quality of life change to remove an unnecessary button, this does mean that Shoha itself now has a range of 10 yalms, which is cool. Overall, these changes serve to both increase its burst damage at a baseline, while also giving players new tools to optimize and experiment with. As far as Dawntrail changes go, these are, in my opinion, the most healthy and innovative job changes in the entire expansion so far. I promise I'm not biased. With the 7.05 change to Tsubame, in my opinion, these changes are a natural and healthy progression from the Samurai we had towards the end of Endwalker, now with new tools and techniques for Samurai players to learn while adding some extra quality of life. Additionally, with more damage being baked into its standard kit, this will increase the baseline of Samurai damage, making this job even easier for new players to pick up and do well with. And honestly, I think this is really healthy. Over the years, there's been tons of conversations about job simplification and how every job is becoming easier and easier to play at a baseline. One of the big criticisms of this is that it lowers the skill ceiling of the game and reduces the opportunity for player expression and creativity. That being said, I think the changes in 7.05 have served to both make the job more accessible while also increasing its skill ceiling. Newer players can rely on the guaranteed extra damage from the Tendo Madares, while better players who really want to push and optimize their damage have so much freedom over how they use their Tsubames now. This level of skill expression doesn't impede with the baseline ability to play the job. It's only there if you want to engage with it. And if you do, it's honestly really fun. I said this to myself at the beginning of the patch, and now after playing it for quite a few months, I can still pretty confidently say, I think this is the most fun Samurai has ever been since I've played it. One of the things that I really enjoy about this job, and have always valued, is that the more I've played it over the years, the more and more I learn. It really feels like there's always something more to practice or learn or optimize. For some players that might seem really tedious or stressful or just annoying, but I think it's really fun. There's so much nuance and depth to your decision making, and since there's so many options for how you can change or modify your rotation, how you actually play can look very different across many different fights, team comps, or just how you're feeling. In addition, I really enjoy the aspect of having to factor in cast times. I love working for my uptime, whether that be staying in melee range or just standing still to finish a cast. So playing as a caster light and getting to compromise and get both is really fun to me. I enjoy needing to think like a caster at times and planning out my movement carefully with Iaijutsu. I love optimizing the third eyes and tengetsus, being rewarded for intelligent mitigation. This job really rewards you for your time with it. I really do understand player frustration with job design in this game, and I do think it's important to be critical of the things we know and like. Jobs like Summoner received practically nothing this expansion, while Black Mage had all of its advanced rotations pretty much gutted. Viper had a major mechanic completely removed before it really had a chance to breathe, while the balance of Pictomancer remains wildly out of line compared to almost all other DPS. I was very apprehensive about the Samurai changes on launch 7.0, and honestly, they were pretty bad. But I also think it's important to praise the things that have been done right. Pretty much every issue I had with the job has been fixed now, and I know I can't speak for everyone, but I am very happy with the job as it is now. It gives me hope to see things changing in a positive direction. You know, even if it's just one job, these changes take time. I've been playing this job for quite a while now, and in recent history, by far the most controversial change this job has received has been the removal of Kaiten back in patch 6.1. This is a sentiment that is still complained about to this day, and trust me, I get it. For the first few weeks of that patch, I decided I was dropping Samurai and picked up Dragoon, and in retrospect, I really did not like Dragoon and Endwalker. But these things are destined to change. Eventually I stuck with the job anyways, and I started to grow into appreciating what 6.1 had done for it. Yes, Kaiten was gone, but now we had more tools in our kit to intelligently build and spend our gauge. We had less quote-unquote forced weaves on our Iaijutsu casts, which made the job's 2-minute way less rigid and allowed us to comfortably slot in a feint or third eye as needed. Now with Dawntrail, the design intention of Kaiten has been re-implemented between the Tendo buff and lowered cooldown on Sene. We have the Tendo buff to amplify the power of our Madares, and the lowered cooldown on Sene means we need to track our gauge a little bit more outside of our 2-minute burst. Maybe it's not the same, but it's never going to be. And it doesn't need to, either. The changes this expansion have increased the amount of decision points in our rotation pretty much inarguably. We have more choices about what to use and when, and we have more consequences for those actions, more potential to drift cooldowns or misalign things. There's a ton of factors you need to keep in mind to fully optimize, but you can still just Madare spam to your heart's content and do well. I know this term is ultimately subjective or whatever, but I think this is good design. This job knows what its core identity is, and it's remained true to that for at least as long as I've played it. Sure, it's not perfect, and yeah, of course, it's not for everybody, but that's okay. Not every job needs to be for every player. Even though I love the melee DPS role and have been playing it for most of my time both in and out of raid, this is the one job I keep coming back to. This is the job for me, and that matters. Ultimately, time will tell what's in store for us with 7.1 and onwards, but personally, I can't wait to try Samurai out in the new Ultimate, having to push all of my new tools to their absolute limit. I hope that in the future more and more jobs will have their tools expanded and built upon in a healthy way, because everybody deserves to enjoy the job that is their favorite. Maybe it's just wishful thinking at this point, but hey, we'll see. After all, 7.1 is just around the corner. Anyways, that's about all I've got for now, so thanks for watching.